You were never meant to hear this. Even now, centuries later, the echoes of what was done in Babylon still seep through stone, through dust, through the memory of a world that tried to erase itself. Picture this, October, 539 BC. The city has just fallen. Fire devours rooftops, soldiers drag gold from shattered vaults. But in the ruins of Marduk's temple, the Persians did not find treasure. They found warnings. Clay tablets scattered like bones, each etched with frantic words. Do not wake what sleeps below. The 13th moon brings his return. And at the center, the skeleton of a child. Buried in silence, surrounded by broken idols as if even the gods themselves had abandoned him. But here's the truth no empire wanted written: this wasn't the burial of a victim. It was the burial of a secret. A ritual older than Babylon, more ancient than the walls themselves. A ritual that swallowed boys alive, stripped them of self, and fed them to something greater than death. They told mothers their sons were chosen. They dressed the abduction in gold and incense, as though kidnapping could become holy if wrapped in enough ceremony. But the reality was worse than sacrifice. The boys were not killed quickly. They were reshaped. Reforged. Broken down until their innocence became a currency in the temple's economy of fear. Imagine a child, 13 years old, dragged from his mother's arms while priests chant of honor and duty. Imagine the walk through Babylon's markets, citizens lowering their eyes because everyone knows what happens inside those walls, but no one dares speak. And imagine being that boy, memorizing the smell of bread, the warmth of sunlight, because you know you'll never feel them again. This was not religion. This was control. The priests of Babylon understood something modern institutions still use today: the most effective chains are not made of iron. They are carved into the mind. To enslave the future, you take the purest, and make them unrecognizable to themselves. That's why these stories were buried, locked beneath warnings carved into clay. Because once you understand what Babylon did, you begin to see the same pattern in empires that followed. Rome. Byzantium. Even the modern powers cloaked in marble and glass. Different faces, same hunger. And if you keep listening, you'll see the thread connecting them all. But I warn you, once you hear the rest, you will never again look at temples, governments, or rituals of power the same way. The morning they came for him, even the birds fell silent. Shamash was grinding barley with his sister when the bells first rang. Not festival bells. Not wedding bells. These were the copper chimes of the selector. Every mother in Babylon knew that sound. It meant a child would not return home. 3 priests entered, dressed in white robes. Behind them, guards in bronze armor. And at their center, the woman who chose. She did not need to speak, her eyes were weapons. They scanned the room, passing over his siblings, lingering on him. 13. Virgin. Old enough to know fear, young enough to be molded. She nodded once, as if tallying livestock. This one. What happened next tore through the house like a storm. His mother begged, clawed, offered everything they owned. His father threatened, then wept. But the temple's word was final. They told the family he had been chosen to serve the gods themselves. As if that was a blessing. As if being stolen was divine. But you see, this is how power operates. It never needs to justify itself. It cloaks its hunger in sacred language. The priests didn't have to fight for the boy. They had something stronger: belief. Belief that their rituals kept Babylon safe, belief that opposing them was blasphemy. And when people believe their own chains are holy, the chain doesn't break. It tightens. The crowd outside didn't intervene. Neighbors looked away. Because in Babylon, silence was survival. Everyone knew what the temple did to boys, but no one dared to say it. That is how institutions protect themselves, by turning every witness into an accomplice through fear. As they dragged him through the market, Shamash-Shidi tried to hold the world in his senses. Bread baking, merchants shouting, sunlight warming his face. He didn't know why, but something inside whispered, remember this. Because memory was all he would carry into the temple. And the temple was waiting. Its halls were not built for worship but for consumption. Its priests were not guardians of gods but parasites feeding on innocence. Every step Shamash-Shidi took toward those gates was another step into a machine designed to crush spirit, bend will, and forge obedience. This is the lesson Babylon teaches us. Across 2,500 years, the most terrifying tyrants don't rule armies. They rule minds. And once they convince you their cruelty is sacred, they can make you kneel without lifting a blade. The temple doors shut like a tomb. Behind them, the noise of Babylon faded, replaced by whispers and the low drone of ritual chants. Shamash-Shidi's wrists were bound with cord, not because he could escape, but because every gesture was meant to remind him, you are no longer yours. The air was thick with smoke. Not the incense of festivals, but something harsher, a bitter resin that stung the lungs, designed to weaken the body and cloud the mind. It was here that the boys chosen for the holy service were first unmade. The priests called it purification. Stripping off clothes, shaving heads, washing the body in cold water until teeth rattled. But it wasn't cleansing. It was erasure. A boy entered those halls with a name, a family, a memory of warmth. Piece by piece, those were cut away. And when the priests spoke, their voices carried the weight of eternity. Your body is not yours. Your breath is not yours. You belong to the gods. But who were these gods really? Stone idols that never spoke, or the men standing before them, cloaked in robes, commanding absolute obedience? Every ritual, every chant, was a mask for power. And when power wears the mask of divinity, resistance feels like heresy. The other boys he saw, some trembling, some hollow-eyed, some too numb to cry, were not companions. They were mirrors of his fate. They were taught to distrust one another, to confess sins they never committed, to whisper secrets that would later be used as chains. Divide and weaken. Break and reforge. The system was perfect. And then came the offering. Not a sacrifice of lambs or bulls, but of purity itself. The priests believed, or claimed to believe, that the untouched spirit of a boy could open doors to hidden realms, unlock visions, grant them access to powers forbidden to ordinary men. The boys were vessels, nothing more. Their pain was currency. Their innocence, fuel. When Shamash-Shidi lay on the cold stone floor, staring at torches that burned too bright, he realized the truth: death would have been kinder. What the temple sought was worse than blood. It wanted transformation. To turn boys into something unrecognizable, broken tools that served power forever. And here's the question that should haunt you: when you strip a human being to the core, erase identity, and replace it with obedience, does anything of the original remain? Or do you create something new, something less than human, but more useful than a slave? This is not just ancient cruelty. It is a blueprint. The same methods echo in every empire, every institution that feeds on silence. They just wear different robes now. They told the people these rituals kept Babylon safe. That by offering virgin boys, the gods would bless the city with fertility, rain, and victory in war. But that was the lie carved in stone for the masses. Inside the temple, the priests whispered a different truth. The ritual wasn't about worship. It was about power, the kind of power that comes from breaking a soul until it no longer resists, then bending it towards secret purposes. They believed innocence contained a force, a purity of spirit uncorrupted by desire. By destroying it in precise, ritualized ways, they thought they could harvest something invisible. Not just obedience, but energy. Clay tablets recovered centuries later speak of the tearing of the veil, of doors opening in the minds of broken children, of visions spilling through tears. Priests claimed that when a boy's will collapsed, his spirit became a bridge, a channel to gods that were less like protectors and more like predators. Entities that fed not on sacrifice, but on submission. Imagine being 13, stripped, humiliated, surrounded by men chanting words older than your language. Your body trembling not from cold, but from the violation of self. And as your will fractures, you begin to see things. Shadows moving where there should be none. Voices whispering from beyond the firelight. A boy wasn't just destroyed in these chambers, he was opened. And what came through him did not belong to him anymore. Shamash-Idhi felt it. A pressure in his mind, a darkness pressing against his chest as if something wanted in. He clenched his teeth, clung to the memory of his mother's face, refusing to let it enter. But every strike, every chant, every forced act was designed to pry his spirit wider. The priest circled, recording his words, waiting for the moment his defenses broke. This was the true purpose of Babylon's priesthood, not to serve gods, but to manufacture them. To create conduits through suffering, to summon power they could control. The boys were not chosen because they were special. They were chosen because they were fuel. But here's the part no priest ever confessed aloud: sometimes the fuel burned back. Sometimes a boy did not collapse into obedience, but into something else: madness, rage, visions that defied control. And when that happened, the priests didn't speak of it. They buried the evidence deep beneath the temple floors, sealing the chamber with warnings: do not wake what sleeps below. Shamash-Idhi was on the edge of that breaking point. His body bent, his spirit cracking, but a fire in him refused to extinguish. For the first time, he realized something terrifying: the priests weren't gods. They were parasites. And parasites could bleed. The human spirit has limits. And Shamash-Idhi had reached his. The priests thought they were in control. They thought the ritual was unfolding as it always had, the boy trembling, the chants rising, the will collapsing. But something different burned in him. Something they did not expect. As his body convulsed, visions tore through his mind. Not dreams, not madness, revelations. He saw Babylon not as the jewel of the earth, but as a carcass, feeding parasites draped in silk. He saw the priests for what they were: men hiding behind idols, disguising their greed as divinity. And he saw the future: empires not yet born, repeating the same script with new costumes. Rome's purple. Byzantium's gold. Even nations not yet named, wrapped in flags and marble, feeding their children into different kinds of temples. For the first time, Shamash-Idhi understood the great lie: gods were not fed by sacrifice. Men were. Power was. And every ritual, every ceremony, every demand for obedience was built on one principle: take the innocence of the living, twist it, and consume it. The visions deepened. He saw men in suits centuries later, speaking from polished podiums, their words smooth but empty, commanding loyalty, demanding submission. He saw the same fear in the eyes of citizens that once filled Babylon's markets. Silence. Obedience. The ritual continued, just in different forms. And then he heard a voice. Not the priests. Not the idols. A voice that felt like it rose from within himself, yet older than time: do not bow. Do not let them in. They cannot take what you refuse to give. For the first time, Shamash-Idhi fought back. Not with fists, but with refusal. He refused their chants, their authority, their claim over his spirit. And in that act of defiance, something inside him snapped, not into submission, but into clarity. The priests saw it in his eyes: a boy who had glimpsed truth, and once truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. This is where you, watching now, must make a choice. You can hear this story as history and move on. Or you can lock in what it really means: that institutions feeding on your silence still surround you. If you choose the second path, mark it now. Comment the phrase twice: I will not bow. Twice, because the first breaks illusion, the second seal's identity. The priests feared nothing more than a boy who saw through them. And they should. Because one awakened mind is more dangerous than an army of obedient slaves. The priests were not used to fear. They were the ones who inspired it. But when Shamashidi's eyes locked onto theirs, unbroken, unbowed, they flinched. A boy was supposed to collapse, to beg, to surrender. This one stared through them, as though he could see the rot beneath their robes. They tried to force him back into submission. The chants grew louder. The smoke thickened. The cords cut into his wrists as they pulled tighter. One priest struck him across the face, another pressed a blade against his skin. But the fire inside him only burned brighter. He had glimpsed the truth, and truth cannot be unlearned. For the first time, the ritual faltered. The circle lost rhythm. One priest's voice cracked mid-chant, his confidence broken by the boy's silence. Another trembled, seeing not a victim but a mirror, a reminder of what they had once been before they sold their humanity to power. The system relied on certainty, on repetition, on the myth that no one could resist. And here was proof that resistance was possible. Shamashidi whispered something, not a prayer, not a plea, but a declaration: "You are not gods. You are men." The chamber froze. No words were more dangerous. Because once spoken, they could not be contained. Every boy, every acolyte, every trembling witness who heard them felt a spark ignite in their own chest. If the priests were only men, then their chains were only lies. Panic spread among the white-robed figures. They shouted over one another, demanding the ritual continue, terrified the silence would grow. They dragged the boy toward the altar, desperate to finish what they started, to prove their power still held. But the chamber was already shifting. The torches flickered, the air grew heavy, and even the idols seemed to waver, as if the masks were slipping. This is the moment every system dreads, when its victims refuse to play the role written for them. Empires do not collapse from enemies at the gates, they collapse when obedience falters from within. And here, in the depths of Babylon, one boy's refusal cracked centuries of control. The priests had no choice. They could not let the defiance spread. What they did next would be buried, sealed beneath warnings, erased from history's surface. But fragments survived, carved in clay and whispered in ruins. Fragments that speak of a boy who broke the ritual, and of priests who learned that fear can cut both ways. The record stops suddenly. The tablets break mid-sentence. The ritual was interrupted, the order fractured, and what followed was erased with the precision of fear. But fragments remain, enough to piece together the cover-up. The priests did what all institutions do when their illusion cracks: they buried it. Shamashidi never returned to his family. His name was never spoken in Babylon again. Yet deep beneath the temple, sealed chambers tell the story. A skeleton of a boy, bones curled as if resisting even in death, surrounded by clay warnings: do not wake what sleeps below. This was not a burial of honor. It was containment. They feared not just what he had become, but what he represented, proof that obedience was not inevitable. Proof that even in the darkest machinery of power, defiance can ignite. The Persians who found those chambers centuries later recoiled, but they did not understand the deeper horror. This was not about Babylon. It was about a pattern. Every empire, every institution that rises, learns the same secret: control is not maintained by swords, but by shaping the minds of men. Babylon used temples. Rome used arenas. Medieval kings used thrones and churches. Modern powers use screens, algorithms, and language polished smooth enough to lull you asleep. But the blueprint has not changed. Selection. Isolation. Ritual. Erasure. Transformation. The taking of innocence, the manufacturing of obedience. The same chain that bound Shamashidi is offered to you in different form every day. You are told to kneel not with your body, but with your attention. To give not your blood, but your belief. To bow not before idols of stone, but before narratives carved in glass. The priests of Babylon feared a boy who would not bow. And that is why his story was buried, because if one could resist, others might follow. That fear echoes now. Because the greatest danger to any system is the moment you stop believing in it. So here we stand, 2.5 millennia later, staring into the same abyss. You have heard what was never meant to be told. You have seen how the rituals of the past are mirrored in the present. And now the question lingers, will you look away, pretend you never heard, and let the chains tighten? Or will you remember the boy who defied Babylon, and carry that defiance in your own blood? History is not dead. It is repeating. And somewhere beneath the ruins, a warning still waits, do not bow.